Hi everybody. Just a little bit of my own background, and it kind of will put the actual presentation into perspective today. I hope I didn't sell you short. I was absolutely delighted to be here for Erica's presentation, because the last few slides kind of tie into what I'm going to speak about towards the end of my presentation, which is about the skills shortage, as the title will tell you. But the actual bridging of the gap that I'm looking at is bridging that gap over the long term, and not necessarily looking at those short-term initiatives that are in place at the moment through the CIF and otherwise. Now, I do cover that at the presentation, but certainly the main, I suppose, part of this is to showcase a project that we've had in place at the Institute over the last 3 years. Again, I've been lecturing there for about 17 years, and I suppose my impetus for this particular area comes from being a mammy and having children at various different stages of their particular education. Very passionate about taking learning out of the classroom in some ways. A lot of the initiatives that we find nowadays are in the schools. I fully support them. We have very good schools programs in place at the Institute. But I do see this very much about taking it into the social learning forum, taking it out into their everyday lives, and this is what the second part of this presentation is about. So, I suppose the crux of this comes from Michael Stone's, the CIF's president's quotations, and they were presented both in the annual report in 2015 and in their submission to government at the general election. And basically that one of the biggest challenges that he believes that's facing the industry is not only the skills shortage, but that the challenge is actually getting young people to see the construction industry as attractive as a career. And secondly, that he does believe we need to support schools, guidance counsellors to encourage students to take on a professional career within the sector. Now, I actually believe that we need to go further than that, and I think that sometimes, like, learning theory would show that if you put essentially a topic or a particular initiative into the school environment, it's a formal learning environment and therefore may not have the effect that you might want to achieve. So what we believe in learning theory is that if you take it into the social learning environment or take it into everyday life, it can be more effective. So just a quick outline. I'll cover a little bit on the demand that's there at the moment in terms of the construction sector in Ireland. I'll look at skills shortage within the construction sector. And then I'm looking at, I suppose, bridging that gap both over the short and medium term, which is very much about the initiatives that are in place with the CIF and the professional bodies. And then I'll look at our own initiative at the Institute and another initiative that's run by CIOB, the Chartered Institute of Building, in terms of trying to get young people interested in careers in construction. I'll then have a little summary and conclusion, and then any questions and answers. So I suppose, these figures have been thrown about a bit today. But certainly construction employment is definitely improving in the country. In the quarter of 2012, we only had 104,200 employed in it. That's now increased to 126,200, which is an increase of 21.1%, and it continues to increase. And I did hear that earlier on in one of the presentations that last week on jobs on the net, you had 2,500 jobs available. The construction sector, it is experiencing the largest employment growth between 2014 and 2015. The output is up 14%, and we can see that continuously with the various different sectors, both the house in terms of house building, but certainly commercial property construction, as you can see, over the same period of time was basically up by 300%. Now that was a huge jump in terms of output. The Construction 2020 document does suggest that we need 60,000 professionals and tradespeople are actually needed to support the 12% of GNP that construction is to contribute to over the period of the plan. And lastly, in the government this year have committed state investment of up to 42 billion to 2021, which would probably equate to approximately 45,000 construction jobs over the same period. But there in red is the problem, that unfortunately skills shortages are affecting this growth and this employment within the construction sector and future demand. So these infographics just really cover the same points. I mean, it was interesting that in 2014, 1 in every 2 jobs was actually created within construction. And construction contributed to almost 45% of the jobs that were being created at that time. So that is a huge figure in the picture of things. And on the other side, that's the Action Plan for Jobs, which was published by the government early this year, which actually indicates that there was an increase in construction jobs of 22,000, and the commercial property of 300% increase is shown there. So, looking at the shortages, I actually reviewed 3 main reports. I reviewed the Chartered Institute of Building report, which actually was published in 2013. Now, it's published in the context of the UK, but the academic would often suggest to you that I've checked against the similarities and the 2 sectors, and we're very closely linked. So therefore, and indeed, there were 3% of the particular respondents are actually from Ireland and Northern Ireland. So it has an Irish context as well. And in 2013, they did a report. It was the 10th report that they carried out about skills in the construction sector. And they found that in 2013, 82% of the respondents felt that there was a skills shortage in the industry. Now, that was plus 5%, and it increases as it goes along. So unfortunately, we seem to still have that skills shortage. And they have suggested that the main areas in which the shortages were, as you can see, were basically in the trades area at 66%, technical skills, construction management skills, the environment and sustainability skills, and then moving down to communication and negotiation. Now, these particular skills are also highlighted by the SCSI, the Society of Chartered Surveyors here in Ireland, in 2014, and they found similar trends in terms of skill shortages. Now, they looked primarily at the professional side in terms of property and construction and property surveying. Now, they found that, taking a conservative estimate of about 2% economic growth, that there would be 1,110 new employment opportunities created in the construction sector in the surveying professions between 2014 and 2018. Taking a more optimistic estimate, and probably closer to the growth that we're experiencing, they actually suggested that we'd have 2,360 new opportunities. But unfortunately, that when they looked at the enrolments on our programmes within institutes of technology such as ourselves and the other institutes of technology nationally, the universities and DIT, they actually found that there were 835 people enrolled in programmes, and over the 4-year period that there could be a shortfall of between 24% and as massive as 65%. Now, last year, anecdotally, as we say sometimes when we haven't done the actual research, but I noticed during our industry day last year at the Institute, we had a company from the UK who came over, Siteman came over to actually recruit, and he was offering 60,000 sterling for a graduate quantity surveyor, and that's what he was offering to get somebody to go over to the UK to work. So we're competing with that particular shortage, not only here in Ireland. I've done a cursory review of international skills shortages, and I would find, just doing that cursory review, that we're not alone. Canada is experiencing in the trades area, for example, an ageing workforce, and has a huge demand and can't meet the skills requirements in their trades areas. The UK, as you can see from the Chartered Institute of Building, is still experiencing a skills shortage. So this, to me, is something that we need to look at, kind of internationally and not just here in Ireland. These are just the figures again from the SCSI's report in 2014, and they looked at 3 main areas of surveying. They looked at quantity surveyors. The shortage there was approximately 428, taking the conservative estimate. Looking at building surveyors, they suggested that there was 84. And the graduate output in terms, of property surveyors was 323. The types of skills that were being, identified in the report that there was a shortage in and that they needed were in the areas of construction surveying, was in the mechanical and electrical, especially in the QS area, in the costing area, dispute resolutions, building information modelling, sustainability and risk management, In the property surveying area, they were looking at distressed asset management, insolvency and arrears management, and then they were also looking at properties and facilities management. I think the skills shortage, lads, actually reflect what's happening in the industry. I mean, most of those skills shortages may not be required long term, but certainly will be required in the short to medium term. The last report that I kind of reviewed, well, in addition to looking at what the CIF actually were reporting on, was the skills needs, the expert group on future skills needs. This report's produced every year for educational providers such as ourselves, who actually are writing programs to try and service industry. So we collaborate with industry to write programs. This is the document that we would use each year for the Springboard Plus programs, which is to try and get people who were unemployed back into the workforce, and we would actually use this document to identify the skills shortages or identify the gaps that exist there, to see if we can bridge them with educational programs in the institutes. Now, what we found is that each year, the last 2 to 3 years, we've received funding in some of these areas, and we've actually written programs in a number of these areas. And the most recent there, we wrote programs not necessarily for Springboard, but certainly in the property and facilities management. We will now have a higher certificate available, which will be taught part-time through the Institute. And we also have one in energy management, which has been recently, in addition to an add-on, one-year add-on in construction management. The chartered surveyors and property surveyors, BIM, lean construction, the BKAR regulations and procedures, the green economy came out, high-end construction skills, business acumen and commercial awareness, and finally management skills. These are the skills that they found a shortage in, and certainly there's been certain programs written to actually service these particular needs. The CIF, on the other hand, would be dealing with a lot with the training, the partnerships that are needed there, and would actually look and have reported that they find it difficult to recruit the quantity surveyors, engineers, experienced project managers, glazing specialists, concrete experts. So you can see a lot of synergies, a lot of crossovers there in the skills shortage. The impact basically is on not only our own domestic economy, but obviously in the ability of the economy and in the ability of Ireland to actually service foreign direct investment. But not only that, we did hear earlier on there from Erigel as well, and from some of the previous presenters, that the skills that we give to our particular students are actually transferable. They transfer across industries, they transfer across boundaries and borders and countries. We are now actually teaching for international markets, not just our own domestic market. But I do think that we need to look close to home first. So in terms of that, the CIF suggested that there were 20,000 people on the live register with construction skills. It's quite a high figure. So these are the people that Erigel have alluded to actually taking back into the workplace, and possibly the other types of programs that we need to start looking at to get those people back to work and get them back into the construction firm. Again, anecdotally, what I found that some of the Springboard students that came out to the BIM program that we run last year, we found that a lot of them said that they were being given the options to kind of transfer across into the IT sector, and that this is what kind of happened at the start of the Springboard programs. What was happening was we took the 40 or 50,000 construction workers that were made unemployed because of the downturn in the economy, and we simply pushed them into the IT sector and took them out of construction. Now, I think we need to reverse that, and again, that is slightly anecdotal. We need pathways to work, training initiatives such as the ones we have heard about today, and we need to meet the sector's needs with regards to skills and employment. So, bridging the gap short to medium term, these are the initiatives that are being promoted by the CIF, by the SCSI, okay? So the first one I looked at was CIF, and in 2016 they're obviously looking at the state sponsorship route for apprentices. They want to roll out the shared apprenticeship scheme that they've actually piloted this year, and I'm a firm supporter of that particular scheme. I think it's a great idea because a lot of the construction companies in Ireland wouldn't be large enough to sustain an apprentice, so perhaps working together. I think we heard this earlier on about collaborating. And basically, they would also like to see Job Plus being extended to the wet trades because it doesn't currently cover wet trades at the moment. They're also looking at grant aid for training of construction companies. Now, I'm aware of a scheme that's in operation through Chartered Institute of Building. They came over to Ireland there a couple of weeks ago to seek out what they call training partnerships, and that they have run a very successful scheme in the UK whereby they work with the company basically trains their employees, and they offer them the support and the networking to actually to reach that objective. The other things that they're looking for is to remove the student levy for Phase 4 and Phase 6 apprentices. I don't know what kind of reaction they'll get from the third level sector at the moment with regard to that, because the Phase 4 and Phase 6 take place in the IoT sector, and as we all know, the discourse in the papers and nationally at the moment is the lack of funding for the third level sector, and that certainly came out in the SCSI's report as well in 2014, that the IoTs are very committed to reaching targets to reduce the skills deficit, but the difficulty is the funding and the resourcing of the actual programs and the resources needed to deliver them. They are looking also at other initiatives such as redundancy costs on construction companies, social insurance benefits for those that were self-employed, and working with CTEC and Turas Nua to identify suitably skilled workers. They have a great website which they just launched quite recently, which maps out apprenticeships as well. You can go in and you can find if you're looking for an apprentice or if an apprentice is looking for a job. SCSI in 2014 made a couple of different suggestions, some of which have certainly been put in place, and certainly with regard to the third level sector. So what they were looking for was an accelerated marketing campaign, so looking at the idea of working with students in the UK, being our closest geographically. They also wanted to look at changing third level to a dynamic where work placements were included, links with industry, collaborate to educate, to look at flexible modes of delivery, certainly a lot more part-time and online learning, and looking at the research and development sector and looking at that in terms of innovation vouchers and fusion projects. And finally, in 2016, most recently, SCSI have actually suggested that they look at an incentivized employer-backed apprentices scheme, which is similar in terms of what the UK have recently announced, which is the Trailblazer scheme. And that is where you basically get, for every £1 you spend, you get £2 back from up to, I think it's £18,000 to actually take on an apprentice. So long term, and I'm going to run through this because I've seen my timing. Basically, this is a programme that I mentioned earlier on that we run at Dundalk Institute of Technology and have done so for the last 3 years. It's a long-term initiative to try and encourage more girls actually into the industry. We are all very familiar, I think the figure I got last week at a CIOB meeting was something like 11% of the sector is actually female. So it is kind of one of my hobby horses is to try and encourage more girls into the industry. And it's a collaboration between Dundalk Institute of Technology and Irish Girl Guides. And to date, as I've suggested, it's run 3 times. We've had 3 different units of the IGG, and 50 girls aged between 10 to 17 have actually been with us at the Institute. It started with 2 members of staff, and it's now at 6 members of staff who take part, both between lecturers and technicians and so forth, and it's now run as part of Engineers Week at the Institute. So the first year in May 2014 we started off, and a very good colleague who's now the head of the Department of Engineering Trades, Simon, and Simon actually ran some plumbing labs for us, and the girls came down and they actually did some labs about, changing taps, they were releasing drains, and they were learning about the plumbing within their homes. And we basically then took them for a walk through a building that we've actually constructed at the Institute to show foundation right up through the house, and as you can see there, it's just a cross section through the house there in the photograph. Engineers 2015, that increased a little bit up to 3 workshops. That year we covered renewable energy labs, electrical labs and plumbing labs. 24 girls, and we got a little bit of publicity because LMFM radio station came down and did some great interviews with not us but the kids, and it was absolutely fantastic, the feedback. So these are probably a bit slow, and I'll try and just move on. This is the renewable energy workshop. The girls actually got to see a wave tank. It was operational. They basically were dealing with the two Toms, as we call them, at work. Dr. Tom Dooley is the head of the Credit Centre at the Institute, and Tom Kelly is actually a PhD student with us. The electricity workshop actually took place in the electrical labs, and a female colleague, Emer Rice, who is a lecturer with us, actually did engineering workshops, and she brought them down around the workshop, showed them all of the different boards, different wiring systems, etc. The last workshop that we actually ran was the, as I mentioned, it was the plumbing workshop as well, which continued from 2014 to 2015, and that's kind of been one of our static workshops until this year. And this year we actually only ran 2 workshops, but because one of the workshops actually went into the construction area, and it took that little bit longer to actually to carry out. So we had 2 workshops. We had one in the electrical lab, but this year we actually pulled it back to more kind of science-based exercises. So they learned how to make a battery out of lemons, basically. And then we looked at construction materials testing, and we actually did the sieve analysis test for aggregates with the girls, and we did a brick porosity test, and we got them to do all the maths, and we got them to do everything that we would do with our students in a day in the college. The reaction was absolutely fantastic. Sorry, I don't know what's happened. Don't know what's happened. Sorry. Okay. So this is this is the Guiding Girls team, basically, with the girls during Engineers Week this year, and like the previous presenter, it was absolutely fantastic. And again, I'll just go through this very quickly. I'll just let them come up. What the girls did, this is the lemon battery exercise that they did. And they basically made the batteries. It worked quite well. They all were very excited about the lemons, and indeed the last photo you'll see, the typical, they can't help but eat even the lemons. So they had great fun with the lemons. This year we had the construction materials workshop, and as I said, they actually did the sieve analysis test, and there was no need for a machine that night. We didn't even have to put it on. They were amazed with the sampling. They were amazed by the fact that we could divide a bucket of aggregate in 2 without having to use weighing scales and so forth. And they had great fun with the brick. We actually tested the brick. We strength tested the brick for them as well. So we put it into our machine, and they basically were in awe. Actually, our technician said, he said, I hope on Monday or Tuesday next week I get the same level of attention and the same interest from your mainstream students as we did from the girls. So the feedback very quickly: Ma'am, I'm going to be a plumber on returning back to the guide hall. Really fun, and learning about how my house is built and works. You know, I had to X the name there, but she never stopped talking to her uncle, who's a technician in Kilcerne Concrete, about his work, and she knew about it, and she's determined that she's now able to work with him, and she's going to go to work with him on Monday. Proposals, I suppose, into the future. IGG have asked us to extend this to a full or a half-day workshop, and indeed we're looking at this extending right out to the northeast region. So if anybody's interested in that, they can talk to me afterwards. We want to also maybe extend it to guiding girls and guys into engineering, because this has a potential to also work with maybe youth groups or to work with scouting organisations as well. It's not just limited to Girl Guides. And certainly, you know, we're hoping as well to look at an online website or blog. I suppose I'm going to finish on something interesting that I came across 2 weeks ago. I was at a BIM open public forum in DIT, and there was a presentation from ACOM, and they made a reference to a report that was written some I suppose years ago on the potential or the risk to certain construction jobs and general jobs due to computerisation and technology. And it was quite interesting because they presented how construction jobs can actually be very, very tentative towards this. And certainly the semi-skilled jobs, and I know BAM have now got a 3D printer for housing. You've got houses in Japan being built using 3D printers. So we have to think about the skill sets that's going to be required in the long term and not just the short term, as we've alluded to. So this is an actual challenge that was set by CIOB this year for young people, and what they did is they ran a competition using Minecraft. And basically, they, the feedback that came back and some of the observations is that some of the skills that we need now are materials technology, sustainability, digital construction technologies, and logistics. Using Minecraft and gaming, actually using the technology skills. You can see kids as young as 2-3 years of age using phones, using games. This is the type of seed we need to plant in those kids' minds, that what you're actually doing is building a house. What you're actually doing is trying to pick out what materials you're going to use. What you're actually doing in some cases is removing them and putting something else in its place. It's everything we do in construction and in the built environment. So it's looking at a really clever way of doing that. And a really interesting comment that came back, and it's in an article that's published in the Construction Manager magazine. I have a copy there if anybody wants to see it in hard copy, but you can download it online. He suggests that what you actually do in a game is what we do as contractors in real life. And we redefine the future of people and places. And so therefore that's kind of the whole idea of these particular schemes. The other thing that came out from it was that they suggested that Minecraft is different as it brings in both genders. You don't have to pick the pink version or the blue version, and it crosses both genders. And that's just some of the examples of work that the CIOB got in their Minecraft competition this year. So I suppose in summary, construction sector output and employment prospects remain on an upwards trend here in Ireland, but however the growth can be stunted by the fact that we have a skills shortage, and not only here in Ireland but internationally. And I'd just like to say thank you, and if you have any questions.